Pilgrim.
Hi, I was thinking about asking you out, but then I realized how stupid that would be. So do you want to go out sometime?
No, that's okay. You just need to sign for this, alright? Yeah, it's how it works. You want me to hang out with you?
Yeah, if that's cool.
If I say yes, will you sign for your damn package? Do that again, and I will end you.
Back off, Haspian! If Gideon can't have you, no one can.
White noise!
Kick her in the balls!
I'd rather be dead than go back. He's a creep, you're a bitch, and you all deserve each other.
Hey, you know Pac-Man?
I know of him.
Well, Pac-Man was originally called Puck-Man. They changed it because, not because Pac-Man looks like a hockey puck. Paku means...
Hello, and welcome back. If you thought part 1 was short, that's because I fit the rest into part 2. You can kind of see it, but not really. Making the custom iconic blue and red-ish star bag out of a blue bag that I thrifted. I mapped out where the star would go using measurements and also eyeballing, terribly eyeballing, and having to redo it multiple times. Measure twice, cut once, but I measured like 4 or 5 times, got it wrong every single time. Luckily, I still only cut once. I started off with a pencil crayon that you can't see on camera, but I could see the crease it made in real life. I then used literally just a popsicle stick, anything straight, and a permanent marker to commit to the line. Once I was happy enough with the size and shape and the placement, I used a utility knife to actually cut it out. I didn't actually know what was below this, I just knew that it was kind of sturdy, so I double checked to make sure I wasn't going completely through the bag. Turns out there was a thick piece of cardboard, so I'm in the clear. Though it did take some fighting after I cut out the edges to actually peel it off completely. Huzzah! But now that I have cut it out, I can use it as a stencil, an opposite stencil of sorts. I placed it on the fabric of my choosing, which if you watch my make a headboard with me, you may recognize this fabric. And I just used it to get a lay of the fabric land. Using a pencil to outline it and then cut out a square around it, being sure to give a ton of seam allowance. I knew that I wanted this star to be 3D, which is why I went through all of this instead of just painting it on, but I didn't want it to only be a little 3D. I wanted a lot 3D. So I added some fabric hot glue to the back and the front, whichever it ends up being, and then adding some scrap batting also from the headboard video on top. Flipping it around and continuing on the other side. Once I had it both down, I cut off the excess, then did the same to the coral fabric. Wrapping it around as nicely as I could and then gluing it down. Alright, moment of truth. Does this look like shit? Eh. I switched to actual hot glue to secure it back onto the bag. Oh, that took some of my fingerprint. I don't know if you guys can see that. Her bag also has an outer circle, like a border of the same color. For this, I actually used a leather paint. My first time ever using leather paint, actually. This is faux leather, though, so it did end up getting a little tacky, but that went away over time. I did primer first, though, not like the usual, like, white way I would, like the white way, jeez, but like a white primer kind of thing to, like, boost the color, but this was more of, like, taking away the grease, the grime, the oil off of the fabric to start. Then I mixed up my own color with red and pink until I color matched it as best as I possibly could. Painted a little bit of it and then realized I was getting a little too messy, so I taped off the area and continued. I did do 2 coats of this. And then I set it with the leather sealant. I hate it when I'm opening something and the plastic stays on. Don't worry about that. I'm going to be taking that off another time. Finally, these straps for this bag. They were blue, but I needed them to be the same color as the star in the border, so I removed the hardware from it by simply seam ripping the very minimal amount that actually held the ends together, and then I measured it out to see how much I would have to cut out for my coral fabric. I didn't just want the strap to be this fabric, I wanted it to be a little bit more stable without having to use the original strap, so I added elastic in the middle. I had to account for that while measuring the fabric. I took the width of the elastic, doubled that as I would be going over top and bottom, and add a little bit extra to the sides. I believe like a 1/4 inch for seam allowance, which is actually less than I normally would, but I knew that I would be simply placing the elastic in, folding the fabric over, and pulling the edges in and sewing over the elastic, if that makes sense. Anyways, basically I wasn't hiding anything except the rough edges. Once I had that sewn, I cut off the rest of the elastic, folded over each with their respective pieces of hardware attached to them, and sewed both sides together. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Then reattach them to the bag, and there we go. Now moving on, the By Pride sweater. Again, I thrifted one that looked enough like the base of hers and then mapped out where the blue line portion would be. I did mix up my own fabric paint, as I do, and then painted it in. This was actually kind of a difficult fabric to paint, as I had to be sure to paint in every single direction because it was like animal fur, like long animal fur. Like, think of a cat, like a long-haired cat, grooming itself. When it was mostly dry to the touch, I removed the bottom piece of tape. And placed over another piece down further and higher above. So partially over the blue and then way down. Continuing with the mostly orange with the same painting process and technique. Okay, now a little bit of pink. And then I realized it also had some pink on one end, so I quickly added that and then blended. Then left it to dry. Now for some peel porn. Let's see how clean it was. Finally, the last DIY, which is barely a DIY, honestly, but I filmed it, so I wanted to add it in. I found a faux jean romper, and it was green, but it was definitely more of a lime green than I had ever seen. I needed it to be kind of like a brown green, so I used some fabric that I That is a lot. So I used some fabric dye, maybe about like 3/4 green to 1/4 brown. and let it come to a boil. And then place the entire romper in. Being sure to agitate the romper every 5 minutes or so for about half an hour as instructed by, well, the instructions. And then I've rinsed it and hung it to dry, and the rest is history. This concludes part 2. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in my next video. Happy Halloween, guys.